In FPL Differential XI, I pick a team of 11 lowly owned players who I predict to score the most points for the upcoming game week to assist you in gaining rank over other fantasy managers. There's just 3 rules. The squad must be worth a maximum of 82.5 million. Each player must be selected by less than 10% of managers, and I'm only allowed to pick up to 3 players from a single team. A silhouette of each player I've selected is already on the pitch, so play along by seeing how many of the 11 you can correctly guess. This week in goal, I'm starting off with Nick Pope for Newcastle's home match against Nottingham Forest. Pope put in a solid performance in the game against Arsenal. That was until the final minute, when he failed to get anywhere near the corner that eventually led to Gabriel's winning headed goal. The Magpies defended resolutely pretty much the entire match, and it was just a couple of lapses in concentration late on that turned the game completely on its head. However, despite that defeat, they've still kept 4 clean sheets in the first 6 game weeks, and this week they're against a Forest side who themselves have only netted 5 times since the season began. Dan Burn hit 9 DEFCON points versus Arsenal, and so just marginally missed out on the additional 2 points. Even so, he's still hit that threshold on 50% of games this season, and I think he's got a decent chance of scoring the points again this week. There are a fair few defences that I could go for players from in Game Week 7, but I definitely fancy Newcastle's chances of a clean sheet above practically all the other teams in the division. Burn has played every minute of every game so far this season, and with his aerial threat, he's always got the off chance of returning something from a set piece. Crystal Palace absolutely dominated in Game Week 5 against a Liverpool side who, before that fixture, were yet to drop a single point in the league. The Eagles required a last-minute winner from Nketiah to get them over the line, but in all fairness, the 2-1 scoreline was probably slightly flattering for Liverpool. Palace have performed well throughout the start of the campaign, especially from a defensive point of view, with 3 clean sheets in 6. This week they face an Everton side who have impressed so far this season, making this one a tough one to call. I reckon that 1 goal separates these teams, and I can see Palace just about coming out on top. Lacroix will more than likely score DEFCON points as well, which just makes him a solid all-round pick. Matty Cash made a crucial block that prevented Fulham from going 2-0 up at the weekend, and that intervention was really the turning point that allowed Villa to get back into the game and eventually pick up their first win of the season. I'm backing Cash to do well this week, because not only do I think his odds of getting a clean sheet are pretty high, but there's also a bit of offensive threat there as well. We've seen him start to take corners from the left-hand side this year, and also for his goal against Sunderland, the ball was laid back to him from a direct free kick, so he appears to be being utilised more as an attacking outlet. Before revealing the next player, if you fancy winning yourself a channel shoutout and a place on the Differential 11 leaderboard, correctly guess the point total of this week's Differential 11 team, or guess the player who individually scores the most points in this upcoming game week of FPL. Details of how to submit your predictions will be down below in the pinned comment. There's not many Arsenal assets in the game that are currently under 10% selected, so I'm delighted to see that Bukayo Saka is, and with that, he's a no-brainer for the Differential 11 team for his home game against West Ham. After returning from a relatively lengthy spell out on the sidelines, Saka managed to play about 2/3 of the game against Newcastle, and he put in a pretty decent performance, taking on defenders and pulling the ball back on a number of occasions. I'm actually really glad that he didn't return in that game, as I think he'll go into Game Week 7 so lowly owned, and West Ham at home always seems to be a favourable fixture for the Gunners. Nottingham Forest are sitting 19th in the current form table in the Premier League, and things are definitely yet to gel for them this season. They've conceded in each of their first 6 fixtures, which is so unlike the Forest that we saw from last year, and to be honest, I don't give them much of a chance of keeping a clean sheet either at a very atmospheric St James's Park. I've tripled up on the Magpies' assets with Anthony Gordon, who recently returned from a 3-match suspension and is yet to get going this season. My hope with this one is that Newcastle pile on the pressure and create a ton of chances. Gordon also, of course, has the added bonus of being on penalties. Man City have looked absolutely devastating in attack so far this season, and a large part of that is down to Jeremy Doku, who's playing better than he ever has done whilst wearing a City shirt. Doku was one of the standout picks in the Differential 11 team last weekend, returning a couple of assists against Burnley, and at the moment he's playing so well that I would even consider him immune to Pep Roulette to a large extent. In previous seasons, we've seen low block teams cause City an issue, but this year, players like Doku seem to have been given the license to constantly run at the back line to create issues, which I think massively boosts his appeal as an FPL asset. Yakuba Minte's average position map in the Chelsea-Brighton game was very encouraging from an FPL point of view, with the midfielder taking up some very advanced central positions, often finding himself well ahead of the striker. The Gambian has registered a goal and 2 assists in his last 2 Premier League games, and this week he comes up against a Wolves team who sit rock bottom of the table and have yet to keep a clean sheet this season. Being at home and desperately in need of points, I think this is a game that Wolves are going to have to take to their opposition, which should bode well for Brighton's wingers especially, who I'm expecting to return something this week. 2 weeks in a row now where I'm doubling up on City's attack. Burnley completely capitulated towards the end of the match last week, and it allowed Erling Haaland to score a brace in the 90th minute. Even though the 5-1 scoreline might give you the impression that this was a one-sided affair, that wasn't strictly the case, as for a large part of the game, Burnley kept things tight, and City struggled to create a number of clear-cut goal-scoring opportunities. Not many chances came Phil Foden's way, however, he did find himself in a great position in the opening goal, and perhaps might have returned something had it not been for Estev's intervention that resulted in an own goal. Having started 3 games in a row, I'm expecting that Foden starts against Brentford, and they always seem to be a team that he loves scoring against. Ollie Watkins had somewhere in the region of a 35% ownership in FPL before the season began, so it feels strange to be able to include him here in the Differential 11, now that that number has snuck below 10%. Villa finally got off to winning ways in Gameweek 6, and their forward players were heavily involved in the 3-1 victory over Fulham. Watkins eventually opened his account for the season with a beautiful lobbed finish from a long ball over the top, and he also played a part in Villa's 3rd goal. This week he comes up against one of the leakiest defences in the league in Burnley, who have already conceded 13 times. A moment ago I spoke about how Wolves were yet to keep a clean sheet this season. Well, their opponents this week, Brighton, also fall into that category, having conceded in each game week so far. Although I see the Seagulls being marginal favourites coming into this one, they almost always show signs of defensive fragilities, with a high defensive line, allowing forward players the chance to run in and behind. And that's what I think might happen in this game. Strand Larsen gets a couple of high XG one-on-one chances with the keeper. Not only that, but the Norwegian also has the added bonus of being on penalties. I genuinely think he's a great one-week punt if you're willing to go there. Just a quick reminder to let you know that your channel could feature here on the Differential 11 series. The Gameweek 6 Differential 11 team scored a total of 40 points, with Doku and Igor Thiago being standout picks. A couple of you were so close to guessing 40 points, but nobody got it spot on. Nobody also predicted the highest scoring player of the week, who was Alderete from Sunderland, who scored a monster 17 points, which included a goal, a clean sheet, and DEFCON points. And that means that unfortunately, no one is yet to make it onto the channel leaderboard. If you are interested in winning a shout out in next week's video, remember to comment below the number of points that you predict today's Differential 11 team to score, and the highest scoring player of the game week. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and best of luck in hitting those big green arrows.